After we talked about the difference between CMYK and RGB or lighting a primary color, I'd like to talk about some specific case. So now we all know the additive mixing happens a lot if you're using physically or solid color such as a pigment, oil painting, things like that. But does that mean there is no subtractive mixing in terms of lighting? And certainly it is not true. So the white light result, it could get created by mix different colored light, such as example above, but it also, if we think reversely, physically also it's totally possible to extract some certain type of light from the white light by remove the wavelengths from the very spectrum. So that is exactly what happened right here in this example. So if, say, in some case we only have one light, which is a white light, and certainly we could use type of filters or like any type of like a lighting technology to extract the very light we want from this white light, because white light is never come with right by nature. It is a mixture of different colors of light. So how are we gonna use this very function in video games lighting? So I would say personally, I will recommend you keep this phenomenon in mind as a debug option. Alright guys, from this very part, you are actually watching a re-recording with my previous action video, and the simple reason is because whenever I start fire up Unreal, my fan just goes loud. I think this is gonna go better once I've replaced my GPU and the fan system. But anyhow, here we go. So earlier we will talk about how the combination result we're seeing in the editor is always gonna be a combination between lighting and diffuse. So here I'm just using part of my personal work to demonstrate. While I was turning on the pure light view mode, and we can see the actual lighting color I'm using right here. So I was just showing you guys around how this thing look by the light color only. But if we switch back to diffuse mode, and we will see the light results gonna be slightly different in this thing. However, it could be drastically different if your thing wears tons of variation on the diffuse color. So the reason I choose this thing to do a cyberpunk lighting is fairly simple, because by nature it wears kind of neutral color, because you can tell most of the diffuse color, they are quite gentle and in a gray tone, because overall cyberpunk lighting style requests a lot of colorized variation. So which is why I think this thing could be a good start, because by nature the neutral colored interior thing is way easier to handle, if your lighting set come with tons of color variations. Because imagine if you have a really busy thing in terms of diffuse color, the situation gonna only get worse if you decide to go cyberpunk, and then you're gonna add on top of that layer is tons of different strong, heavy, saturated lighting color. So that's one thing I wouldn't recommend you guys to do. And at this very point, I was trying to explain how to achieve the best result in terms of busy color lighting. So which is why I was stopped this thing a little bit more and just to go further and let you guys take a close look. Alright, so if I am showing you like tons of different variation into this very corner, I am actually using a lot of reddish light. However, if we use the reddish light, there are two ways to achieve like better color in terms of like busy things. So one way is using the diffuse color only, and there is another way is using the diffuse color first. Like I said, is right here. So I am using the very yellowish color go together with a greenish tone. So the rig is quite simple. You can tell like here is like one yellowish light and one greenish light jade, they're gonna go together. The reason I left this red diffuse mesh right next to it, because imagine if this light goes hit straight to the little red frame to the left, that's gonna result quite busy thing, and it might just confuse you in terms of the result of the lighting color. So what I'm trying to demonstrate right here is if you do have a busy lighting thing, for example, you have like a very busy color, and then the best result gonna show up when you have sort of quiet diffuse information. But vice versa, if you do have a busy diffuse, and in general I will recommend to use simple color for the lighting design, and also the light color should be sort of gentle, because otherwise a direct result is either your diffuse color is too loud to like mix, give you some weird result for the lighting color wise, or your lighting color it have to go really strong, and the result will be it's kind of eaten or chewy the diffuse information. So right here I was trying to show you guys a trick I usually use, because certainly we do use floating lights a lot as a field light, especially if you are using a floating light as a point light, because you get a dark corner, it's real-time lighting, and we got to figure out some situation or like the solution to fix this. Or sometimes we do simply using floating light for character in terms of to serve the best result of the gameplay. So by nature you could see here is a very visible spot. It's kind of gentle, and I'd like you guys to focus some parameter to the right side. So one is the soft source radius and the other one is the source radius. By default, the soft source radius will be just 0, and usually it will result a very visible hot spots like a white patch on the floor. And to avoid it, there are two ways to do so. Either you drag your light slightly further space-wise, so you can drag this guy goes up a bit further, but because you probably remember my floor is actually quite glossy because I got like some of the water paddle right down over there. And what I've done here is usually I will just use the softness, so that's exactly what I'm showing right here. So if you do make this guy go back to 0, and you will see exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm just to keep switching the different light view mode to show you the influence about the pink light or the magenta light, because under the light version, and you can see the light goes quite gradients. So here pay attention, if I switch this guy to 0, and you will see a lot of noisy and visible patch, and the reason it doesn't really go back to a white spot yet because my source radius is kind of large right here. So pay attention on those two radius, because attenuation radius is the actual light bulb, that is actually the white circle. You will see that's the actual size of your light, and the soft source radius, that's where the yellow circle demonstrate. Well, by default we already noticed that, and if you switch this guy back to 0, and you will see the white patch. So that's what I'm doing right now. And now if I go back to 0 again, and you will see the very noisy reflection right here, because it's easier to view them in the light only mode. Okay. So do pay attention on those hard edges, because if you just invited a light actor regardless their point light or spotlight, this is a typical result, just because by default both source radius and soft source radius they remain 0, and that's where you might see the artificial hot spots reflected on the floor if your floor has really reflective or glossy material, because you can tell this artificial is still quite visible even I am using a concrete surface. So just be sure to adjust both of the radius if you do need hiding the hot spot, but you have to keep the point light or like any sort of floating light to fill or serve as a secondary light source. So whenever we talk about hue, that means the pure pigment. It's very simple. You could consider this is the ID of the color: blue, orange, yellow, jade, things like that. And whenever we talk about tone, it's the pure pigment with just the gray added. So if I want to tone more, that means maybe, well, the blue should go darker. So see, we have baby blue, like bright. And if we want something to like more blue tone, perhaps it could go dimmer. It could go from this color to like even more gray, goes down right here. So I think that is the tune we talk about. And then the tint is basically adding more bright. So if we want to tint the blue goes up, that means the blue could remain blue, but they might add more white light. So consider if you're adding a bloom effect in Unreal, or again you push up the gain in post process, and we could call that, yeah, we got more blue tint in terms of color theory. And well, if we talk about the shade, say, hey, I have like a combination, like it's a golden hour Miami coast, and we have like the gold, like sand ones, and then we have the blue ocean right behind. And if I want the shade goes way more blue in that very term, that means the color of the ocean could go indigo or even further. So I hope I explained this into plain human language, and at least that's how I read it. And back to Unreal, this theory, again, how we gonna transfer those understanding, abstract understanding into Unreal. So more or less, again, I write, this is my extra notes. I literally use those notes at work, guys, because that's just to keep everything clear and simple, make my life easier. So yeah, saturation is basically pure color we want, luminance, value, and brightness, and that is exactly we talk about in the V, because HSV or HSL is like different software, they use different name on it, but long story short, HSL is like how the light produce color. So when we talk about this chart in Unreal, that's like they think about in how the light as an energy resource and producing both color and brightness. So for sure, the first one, H, is for hue, that's the idea of the color. We can see like this is basically our color chart, and the saturation is like how intense the color it is. Yeah, they are really basic, but to understand those terms clearly gonna help you a lot, like at least in my personal experience, it helps me a lot to know what exactly I'm doing while I am operating a lot of different lights. And also it helps me understand what is the best choice in terms of color and brightness, because in like at each light we have a couple of factors we have to consider, that is intensity, light color, and also light temperature again, and the softness and hardness. I just remembered, like I mentioned earlier, for the texture. So we got light color, we get brightness, power, and we also get the light texture. And those factors we actually, as a lighting artist, this is what we have to take in concern at every decision when we lighting the level. So I think this is really important to explain those basics again. And again, I'd say I wouldn't have this type of understanding before I've done like a lot of lighting practice. So again, guys, if you're watching this tutorial, and I will strongly recommend you jump into a blank level, create a couple of spheres, and try to mix and play around with the light, because the first-hand experience does the best job in terms of understanding like a very specific term. So yeah, now let's move to the very next. So this is exactly what I was talking about earlier while I was demonstrating this level to you guys. Well, the job is not finished yet, but like I said, whenever I am lighting, regardless to work or like personal work, I think I am a person enjoy mixing and tune the color a lot. Yeah, I will never deny on that, and that's one of the main reasons I choose to be a lighting artist. I just love mixing result and the unexpected surprise with color so much. But to be fair, we wouldn't get a good work with just some random mixing, and sometimes it could get really, really frustrating if you're not understanding what we're doing. So which is why, again, I'd like to leave these notes back, saying whenever we talk about lighting attributes, they're color temperature, and even the parameters or function you're using in the post process, such as contrast adjustment, bloom, or gain, highlight adjustment. So this is my very user-friendly based term I just use all the time. So the final result we saw in Unreal in terms of lighting, it's a combination of light and color itself, and the color temperature on your light source or on your poster process, remember there are two places you could control your color temperature. And the poster process one, I will highly recommend you to keep them default, and then the poster process color temperature together. So those are the three factors, the key factors gonna affect your final result. And remember, in the beginning, I was keep emphasize, do not tune or tint your color too much on your sun and your sky in the beginning, just because now you see the case just keep become even more complicated by the time we are starting adding more and more light source over there. So yeah, this chart I believe I took from one of the photographer website. You guys could find the link in the very boring reading list. I know it's very boring, but yeah, take a look if you're interested about that, because this is just a basic chart talked about, the lighting harmony, because the reason we spend so much time and effort trying to understanding the color theory, because a good artistic result is never stand away from either a contrasty complementary color or a harmony with multiple different color. So this is a cooking menu and give you all different recipes. And for sure, color to us as a human being, it always associated with mood, with the expressive power. So I think understanding color will be really helpful for you to express your own emotion as an artist. But this is the very media we have to keep practicing and hopefully mastering. Then go back to the default function in poster process. This is a screenshot from Unreal, but still I'm gonna jump back to Unreal Engine here, and I think this demonstration makes more sense. So if I do the poster process right here, and if I just quickly type color temperature, so this is one place I am using for control the overall, warm and and you do have two options, color temperature and white balance. I personally tend to use white balance, but I would say the result, regardless which option you are choosing, it's pretty straightforward. So just choose whatever you're comfortable with, honestly. The only difference is if you go white balance, I think this one behaves more like a photographic way. That means if you go higher, actually sorry, this goes a non-photographic way, because if you go higher in white balance, your color gonna looks way warmer. So if I go back to my original color temperature here, and we switch back to the color temperature. So if in this term, if I go higher once again, it will work as a usual color temperature. The thing gonna go way cooler, and if you go lower, it's just gonna be warmer. So this is different, but I choose white balance in this very case, and I think that works for me. Right, and go back to the color temperature again. So by default, the number in Unreal is temperature 6500K. And the reason it's set up right here, it actually coming from this physical term, so it's D65. So use D65 to me while I back to the uni, and my professor just told me consider this is an abstract, floating, imaginated standard human language. And that is because it's a general, a correlated color temperature, approximately 3500K. And that is stand as a general white light. But for sure, depending on the light source, depending on the time of day, even the environment, this D65 could be totally different things by looking. However, whenever we refer the term D65, what it stands exactly, just stand white. So hopefully this gonna makes better sense about why in Unreal, if you draw or call out a post process volume, by default, it's gonna give you 6500, and that's where this term totally coming from. And yeah, now we move to the interesting part. So color theory is completely talk about how we mix color, how we get good result of the color. So here are just a few different mix, and that's consider those as the general rules. You need to know it, but there is absolutely no request to follow it, because I think one thing as an artist I couldn't agree more is we tend to know the rules, and we turn to break it and make something new. So on the left side is some of the extraction or examples about, so those are my own works. And before I start actually, drop the light bulbs into Unreal, I tend to make like those small stuff like the color palette. But sometimes it could be reverse way. For example, I am lighting halfway. I probably get those color like, I got this guy here and this guy here and this guy here. But I haven't got a good idea how to push my work further. In that case, I will just extract some of those existing color, and there's no super advanced technology. What I did is take a screenshot and color picked them into Photoshop, make a chart, and I do, if say for example I'm halfway on my light work, I have 3 colored as a domain color in my thing, I might miss the other 2. So what I do over there is I just try to fill different color in between those gap. Or sometimes it's those 2 missing, sometimes they're like this second one and the third one is missing. So I will simply, I no longer look at my thing, I will simply consider which color gonna goes well with the remain or the already existing ones. And then that's where exactly I start to refer my concept or like my look depth skill, and I start to refer back to those color mixtures. So in general, you could consider those are different formula of color theory, and they're pretty self-explained. Like a monochromatic, I think people will hear them very often because black and white is just like a standard monochromatic color scheme, or like in Blade Runners we saw very often, and in like those popular movies and photography. So it creates the harmony. But the tricky part of monochromatic color palette to myself, I consider that's one of the most challenging lighting thing, just because there is no other color kind of offers you the support to layer the thing anymore. So for whoever you are going to this monochromatic color palette, I would say judge your exposure range, read your light ratio really well, because you do need a very non-forgiving but wide enough exposure to push those dark and bright zone, because otherwise this color palette or this type of style could look very shallow by depth and boring by detail, just because you basically light with single color. It's a very good practice though. I will recommend anyone who is doing exposure related lighting practice, go with this color and see how far you go with it. So the second one is the adjacent or like analogous colors, and basically I call them triangle or cornered color. So how we define this type of color palette is very simple. Pick up some sort of color on the full color circle and find their neighbors. And I personally feel like analogous color scheme is very commercial based, just because by default they are designed to create that sort of harmony. So guys, if you're managed to sell something online, I will highly recommend you to choose this color scheme. And in terms of lighting design, I think a lot of like neon based work, they are actually very friendly, or they are actually could borrow a lot of power on this color scheme, because one trick or like one thing I do have to remind everybody as a lighting artist, or like I constantly remind this to my fellow lighting artist friend, because by the time we choose to go high saturate, so the color gonna looks very shouting, and for sure because it's high saturated with neon light, there's no way we have super bright light source. When all of the light in your theme has almost equally brightness, then we lost one control, one very important scheme control, that is the key light. Because usually imagine you lighting a night theme, and we have see people drive the car, and the car, like the headlight of a car, could easily shape up everything else because it just has that powerful brightness. However, to keep all of those interesting color hue, there's no way to push the brightness further. So which is why if we're choosing some light source, they're all very colorful, and this neighborhood alike color scheme could benefit you a lot, because by color, by hue, it come with that harmony by nature. It will be way easier for you to, you know, pick up the thing and start dressing it, because you see like in this very cut, like the purple, the indigo, the jade color, jade green, everyone is pure, everyone is intense, and same story with those two one. So I'd say like this adjacent color palette is very friendly if you liking something cyberpunk or even sci-fi. And this one is almost the kind of old school, but it's very important. This could be the best and the securest way to sign the thing up, just because you're using complementary color and it could go absolutely different. So well, pros and cons, I'd say to choose this color palette, it's safe. So guys, if you're watching this tutorial and if you're about to having a lighting test, please go with this complementary color, because whoever is a recruiter or like whoever the work is, they are expecting you shape up the space well. So if you do have this challenge, which is our everyday challenge, to complementary the colors and to use them to shape up the space, go for it. But I would say complementary color works the best as a secondary color scheme, and I have my own reason or statement to tell, because usually to use this color whenever we shape up the space, somehow we will end up quite equally the amount of your warm color and the amount of your cold color. They somehow has to control equal space wise in your thing to, you know, define the space. And if we only lighted the thing with both of them, the thing, it does a job. However, I would say it lacks some depth. So a trick I will give you directly is try to think about how far you could push your highlight or shadow, and consider that's an extra layer on top of this complementary base. And usually the result looks far more better. A bright but violent example in this screenshot is, imagine this thing only has those greenish cool light and the orange key light down to here as a footlight, but there's no white highlight. So I do think this thing gonna looks way more shallow. Just trying to imagine we remove this guy, and everything will be green and yellow. So, and same story here, imagine you have those yellowish and this light is way dimmer. So it's gonna be dimmer, you feel the jade green, but it's no longer able to shine with those specular edge on this frame. I think this image will look way different. And that's how I rate them based on the complementary color series. Right, so the last two I'd like to talk about, they are kind of similar. So they are Triadic and Triadic. So those two, more or less, a lot of my UI designer friends, they couldn't recommend them more. And this is just because it comes with harmony. It offers you a kind of secure color division. So that's like, I come with different color palette, but I know like if we go with either color method, those colors gonna come together with a harmony. That's like almost guaranteed. So a live example right here will be, you know, a lot of logo designs, they come with those 4 different colors, and you will always notice they are actually fall into those almost 45 or 90 degrees complementary. So consider this color scheme is actually coming with 2 pair of either adjacent or 2 complement, because technically speaking, those are 2 group of complementary color. But if you look them horizontally, I could also rate them as adjacent color. So this is the interesting part of, you know, combine and combination. And this is one way if you are working on sort of, you know, UIs or like even see detail, because I personally love to use those color when I've already had my lighting base, and then I started using the adjacent color to do more decoration or smooth. Because a live example here in this piece is this variation I was talking about. So that is absolutely an adjacent color. So if I show you my color scheme to this guy, and then I show you this guy, you can tell yellow and green, they're right to each other. So that is like a live case. And the last 2 part, I only want to emphasize one thing here, guys. So do keep in mind, to achieve anything adjacent or like triad colors, you don't really have to give that amount of color on your lighting. You could create it. For example, if I read this thing, everything comes from the diffuse color. The light could be white. So those two, remember, the combination result is the key. So some of those color theory, like complementary or monochromatic, that could go straight to your light source. But the other tricks, like those three guys, I would say try to purposely arrange your thing based on this different color palette. And when you start lighting, especially you rely on a lot on the bouncing light, like looming, then this will do you a huge favor and make some really sweet result as a potential. And the very last one is just a compare and a comparison. So if you do feel really confused about what I was trying to explain above, this is like a long story short version. Right, guys, at here we almost wrapped up this entire lighting session. I hope you do enjoy it. So after this course, I do have other content, and those are paid version for sure, but I'm just gonna talk about a lot of my personal idea how to develop the style. Like I said, there are a lot of awesome tech-based Unreal lighting tutorials, such as William Fulcher's channel, and also my mentor Tillman's channel, the Lighting Academy, and I believe he also recently published a new a complementary lighting theory as well. So I do recommend you guys check a lot with those heavy tech-based lighting tutorial, because after all we are using Unreal as our tool. But like I said, if you do decide to continue with my tutorial following this section, we're gonna talk a lot deep dive about how to define your art style and how to refine it, pushing further in terms of real-time lighting. We're using Unreal Engine, and you could choose whatever assets you have on your own to follow it. And I hope that makes sense. Again, thanks for listening, and I do hope everybody who watched this tutorial takes something away and that will be useful for you. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in a while.